Hey, Lawrence here. Welcome to Business Beats. Thank you for joining. Today we're interviewing a gentleman by the name of Cale Donadelli, 10 to 15 years in sales. So it's all about sales today. Commercial sales and consumer sales. And everything that you need to know to build a strong business, maintain a company, generate revenue, and build an epic team. All right, so thank you for joining. Let's dive in. So Cale, thanks for joining us, mate. Really do appreciate it. So I guess a good place to start, talk to us about your sales experience. So commercial, consumer, how all that came together. I know you've got a bit of experience there, so maybe give us a synopsis of that if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me, mate.
No
So like you said, sort of 10 to 15 years experience in the sales space. Studied communications and business at uni. I was initially working in sort of marketing and market research, initially as a project manager. Before moving into the consumer sales side of things, managing a team. Then moved into the education space about 10 years ago. So I was heading up a business development team across Australia and New Zealand, and now head of commercial for another company in the education space. So yeah, a bit of experience when it comes to sales.
Yeah. Sales, one of my favorite subjects to talk about, right? Challenging as it is.
It is.
Okay, so how about we do this? So for those watching, maybe it's a good opportunity to, start from the first step and move our way through that sales process. So there's two types of sales, right? Commercial and consumer sales. Leads come in a certain way. It could be social media, it could be Google advertising, a whole bunch of things. Let's leave that to one side and talk about a sales team, right?
Yeah.
So if someone was to employ their first sales agent or start to build a team, how would they do that, and what would be some of the key verticals or attributes they're looking for?
Yeah, of course. Look, and I think it's probably should be your first hire, regardless of the business. If you're in a startup space or something like that, hire a sales guy early on.
Yeah. 100%.
Sales heals all, as they say.
Yeah, 100%.
But I think when it actually comes to hiring a salesperson, where I've had probably the most success previously is hiring guys that don't necessarily have, a big, long history of sales experience. For me, I think a lot of it is attitude, it's work ethic. You're looking for someone that's intelligent and that can communicate well. But, there's obviously a lot more to it, but I think a lot can be said for those attributes and, the way that they can contribute to a sales team.
So you want to pick the right attributes, right?
Absolutely.
Put them down on paper and use it as a filtration process when you're hiring.
Yeah, because look, let me tell you, I've had some nightmare hires previously where I've hired career sales guys with, 20, 30 years experience.
Yeah.
They come in with a lot of bad habits, a lot of arrogance, really hard to coach. Not a really good cultural fit either. I think that, it can cause a lot more, trouble than it's worth. Whereas if you get someone that fits, your persona or, your avatar, and someone that fits the culture, you can train them well. If they're a bit of a sponge and they're willing to learn and they're driven, I think with good coaching, you can really turn out some brilliant salespeople.
Interesting, right? Avatar, create an avatar, right? So it's so critical.
Absolutely.
I think people just hire, and then this guy says, "Hey, I've got all the sales experience." They bullshit their way through the interview. You give them a job. 3 months later, you're having to fire them. They've made no sales.
Yeah, it happens.
Really common.
It happens all the time.
Yep.
Yeah, you need to find the right person.
Okay. So have a good filtration process. Create an avatar.
Yep, absolutely.
Stick to it. Tweak it as you sort of move forward and recruit a team, right?
Yeah, because you're going to make mistakes throughout that hiring process. You're going to get things wrong. But continue to tweak it. But look for a person, I think, over experience for me when it comes to sales.
So are you only looking for sales though? Because there's one thing I know about sales agents is some of them are really administratively poor, right? They're not very good at that. Is that important to you, do you think?
I think it depends on the team. But look, I'm not overly concerned. It can slow things down. I've always wanted someone that is reasonably tech savvy, can navigate your systems, because that obviously is important. Your data and maintaining that and making sure it's up to snuff is incredibly important.
Yeah.
If you've got someone that's just going to run really fast and leave all of that, by the wayside, it might not cause a problem right then and there, but I can guarantee if you skip forward 6 to 12 months, you're going to have a massive problem on your hands. Your database is going to be a mess. You're not going to understand, what you've actually got.
Yeah.
And it's going to cause a bunch of issues for incoming staff.
And I think what happens is as you scale a team is that normally the first guy that's in is they start to look at them and emulate them, right? So if they're not good and they're not doing the right thing, everyone sort of does the same thing, right?
Oh, that's exactly right. And if that person leaves and they've done a really shitty job of maintaining, your data and working the systems correctly, the next guy that comes in is just going to have an absolute mess on his hands. And it's usually at that point that you discover what a poor job they were doing.
Okay, cool. So so the next step for me was so KPIs, right? How do you actually determine the right KPIs and metrics for a salesperson? Like very difficult.
Yeah, it's
very difficult.
It's really difficult, particularly when you're doing it for the first time, because it's kind of like just doing that. You have no idea what that should look like. Obviously, it's easy once you've got a number and you can work back. Once you've got data and a decent amount of data, a quarter's worth of data, a year's worth of data, you can extrapolate out and reverse engineer that number. From the outset, though, incredibly difficult to define. I'm a pretty big fan of understanding what the metrics should be, but maybe not assigning a definitive number to them from the jump. Giving yourself...
So what you're talking about is, so the metrics would be what though? Right?
That's it. So you need to know what to measure. And I think that's probably more important from the outset than knowing exactly how much should be assigned to each metric. So there's going to be metrics around activity. That's going to be important, but that's not the be all and end all. I think more important than that is metrics around quality. So, you're talking about conversion rate, you're talking about actual conversations versus just dialing. Because as you'd be aware, you can have someone make 200 dials a day, but that's not necessarily going to generate any money. And it's bad for the, the psyche of the sales guy too, because that will make you neg out if you're doing that day in, day out. That's tough work.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who hang that hat on quantity of calls or dials, right? And that's not definitively a successful metric.
No, but there's something in it. It proves work ethic and it proves resilience and all these really good attributes. But it's definitely on my list, comes under your quality metrics.
Yeah, so certainly dials. Look, I know it's not the big one, but it's important. It gets people started, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Conversion rate in terms of when the lead comes in, you're referring to when you close the deal, right?
Yeah, that's right. But there's conversion rate metrics along that path, right? It's taking a lead that comes in and qualifying them, so a sales qualified lead. That's one amount of conversion, and that probably speaks more to your marketing than to your sales guy. But then booking the appointment actually showing up, and then taking that appointment to the point of, a closed deal. They're really important to measure. And I think, that places things on a really even keel, and that's data that's incredibly important to measure.
And by the way, have a good software system, right, to do all of that, because I think if you have the right tech stack, it just makes your job so much easier.
Yeah, you need a CRM. It doesn't have to be, Salesforce or HubSpot or some big enterprise CRM, but you need something to manage your data and measure activity. Otherwise, if you try to report manually, it might be doable with one person, but once you start to scale, it's just going to be a mess, dude.
Humans make mistakes, right?
They do.
Unless you've got a robot AI sitting in a chair doing it for you, humans make mistakes. Okay, so the agents, so you built a team, say you got 2 or 3 guys now, right?
Yep.
2 or 3 guys or girls, leads are coming in, they're calling those leads, they're booking calls and booking appointments and follow-ups and pipelining and all that sort of stuff. Talk to me about what you think would be the most important metric or the most important activity in terms of converting a sale or a lead to a deal. Like, is it follow-up? Is it discovery? Like, what would that look like?
Look, I think it's hard to say that one thing is more important than another. They all contribute to that sale being closed. You can't have one without the other. I think discovery is crucial.
Why?
Well, you can't close a guy if you don't understand what their pain is, or where their urgency lies. Discovery sets the basis for everything else that you're about to do. If you do discovery right, the close shouldn't be this big fucking scary thing that's there. You should know exactly what to do, and they potentially close themselves. If you do everything right, understand value from the discovery, and just tie it through the process, you're going to have an easy job on your hands, or an easier job.
I agree. So discovery. What's in the discovery? Like, what's important to ensure that you cover off in that discovery?
Look, I think this is where people get it wrong. So discovery, in essence, is just asking questions, but it's asking the right questions. I think a lot of people move through that discovery process in a super generic way. They've got a list of defined questions and they ask them in a defined order, regardless of where the prospect's trying to take them or what the prospect's, sort of uncovering. They just go through this list of questions. They don't actually obtain any value from it. It's all about actively hearing what your customer's saying and then, building platform questions or digging down deep into particular points that are of value to you.
Yeah. So it's questions and responses, right? It's like, I totally 100% agree with that. I call it having a succinct response to a response, right? It's so, I think discovery in terms of my sales team is they'll go through this generic platform, like you said. It's like, so why did you inquire? What are you looking to achieve? Are you looking to get started soon? Or are you just after some research?
Well, those things make sense to have those.
Which is great.
Absolutely.
But you're not talking about that. You're talking about getting really to the crux of
100%.
Right?
So you should do that at the top. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But then once you move on from that, you need to actually be getting, like you said, to the crux of, well, why have they actually inquired? What are they looking to achieve?
Yeah.
Is there an emotional lever behind it? Because that's the easiest thing to pull.
Yeah.
But if you just go through this generic list and sort of disregard their responses, man, they're going to switch off so quickly. Think, God, you're wasting my time. And they're never going to pick up the next call.
Yep. Okay. How long should that call go for? Because, it can't go forever, right?
Man, but look, how long's a piece of string? So I don't think a good discovery doesn't necessarily have to be a long discovery. And I think that's a really common misconception. You can build a ton of data and stack a bunch of value in a 10-minute discovery if you ask the right questions. And I think, that initial conversation or that initial discovery, you as the salesperson shouldn't be really saying too much. It's about, really having them do their piece, interjecting at the right time, maintaining control, asking the right questions, but letting them kind of spill their guts is the goal.
Okay, so let's break down that call a little bit.
Yeah.
So discovery, right? Well, obviously there's the admin stuff, booking appointments, sending the emails, and all that sort of stuff, right?
Of course.
Get them on the phone, do a discovery, and then what are the next steps that you would walk through in terms of servicing the client?
Yeah, I guess it's going to depend on what your product is, but ideally after that discovery, you're probably going to want to move into a demo. That's going to depend if you've actually got like a software as a service product or something like that, you will take them through an actual demo of the product. In the case of, what you're selling education, so you would go through. What are your next thing? What would be in the place of a demo?
It's funny, right? When you say demo, I was just thinking, we should do that because we actually don't do that. We have an online. We're basically an online business, right?
Yep.
And because our product is online, it's an education product. That's the majority of what we do. But we don't run a demo. We send them a link that has a VSL, right?
But I guess the purpose of the demo and whatever you're doing, it's the same, regardless of what you do in that second stage. It's in the discovery, you've understood where their pain is and what they'll perceive as, value.
Yep.
The second step is demonstrating that value and solving that pain. So, in the case of a demo, it might be, hey, we've got this software program where, we're going to increase the conversion rate of your leads if you're selling marketing software.
Yeah.
And that was their pain point. So your demo is going to show exactly how you do that.
Yeah.
In your case, I guess it's, whatever the perceived value is, now you demonstrate, well, this is the value, this is how we solve your pain.
Okay, cool. So the client gets to the end of that demo and like, where do you go to from there? Because sometimes they're not just going to get their credit card out. Right?
No, but you should try to close that.
So is that MasterCard or Visa? Right?
Yeah, you can be as assumptive as that. But look, I think if you've done a good job, if you've done a good job in discovery and you've really demonstrated strong value there, there's absolutely no reason you can't attempt to close them then and there. I guess that's more consumer sales. If you're talking B2B, there's going to be a whole bunch of commercials that need to be considered, and you're probably going to move into a negotiation phase at this point. But consumer sales, try to close.
Yeah, 100%. Wrap some context around what's the average duration for a consumer sales process, right? Like from lead through to the CRM to when you would potentially close them. I know it's going to depend on the product. But hypothetically, if it was it's not an e-com, so we're not doing e-com here.
Yeah, it's all.
Say if it was for one of my companies and it was an education product.
Yeah, what's the price point? $4,000, something like that.
$4,000, 4 or 5 grand.
14 to 20 days, maybe.
14 to 20 days.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. You're obviously going to have outliers. You're going to have one call closes where they've got urgency and ones that drag on for months. But 14 to 21 days.
Okay, so contextually across that time, just for those watching, discovery call. Follow-up call, right? You're probably sending some information in between those two.
That's a really important point as well. You got to nurture them in between those calls. You got to make sure that the second appointment's sticky. If you say you have a week between your discovery and your follow-up call, and you give them nothing in the interim, man, there's a very real chance that they don't pick up that next call. You've got to do stuff to pull them a little closer, keep your business or your product at front of mind, and ensure that appointment's sticky.
Yeah, we struggle with that. Our pickup rate can be as low as 33%, right? On average, we want it to be 60%, but we sit around 50 to 45%.
It's a really common problem, and it's not necessarily just the fact that there's no value being added between the two calls. It could be that there's a really poor job being done at the end of the first call
to book in the appointment, that appointment
to lock it up tight and to set a clear agenda for what's actually going to be covered on that next call. You need to dangle a carrot. If you give them everything at the end of that first call, why would they pick it up? What else can you offer? They're going to pick it up so they can hand you over money. No one likes being sold to. There needs to be a reason for them to take that call.
Yeah, dude. Like that, we have this issue in the business where what happens is salespeople get complacent. So when you're calling every day and you're booking appointments every day, you just become complacent. So what you say about booking that appointment really well, over a period of time, they just get a little bit slack with it, right? And it falls away, right? And what happens is the pickup rate drops.
Man, I think, you spend 60 seconds at the end of that call really focused in explaining, a really nice summary of what you've just covered, a clear outline of next steps, really locking it down. That 60 seconds will be probably the most valuable 60 seconds that you spend on that call.
Yeah, so it's about the agents understanding where the value sits in terms of their actions and what they do. Right?
Yeah, instead of going, hey, I've invested all this time into the discovery. I've done a great job. Hey, job's done. I'm just going to be really sloppy at the end here. Yeah, and then you've just wasted so much time and energy. You've got to stay tight and on the whole time. There's no real room for complacency.
So you've got a script, right? Like you would recommend having a script or some type of framework that they have to follow?
Oh, absolutely. I think... the use of the term there, framework, is probably a pretty important thing. A script, if people stick to a script, and I mean really stick to a script with like incredible rigidity, man, it sounds shit. They end up being a robot, and the client can hear it.
Yeah. So are you saying the sales agent have to have character and personality?
That is what I'm saying. Like you need to inject your own personality into it. You need to be able to, adapt to the client. You need to be able to move your way around, because the client doesn't know that what your script looks like. They're not just going to follow this linear process. Yeah. But if you try to do that when they're not, you're just going to, butt heads the whole time. So it's important to have a framework. It's super important to be able to maintain control of the call. Yeah. But you've got to be able to, be fluid and move around.
That's super interesting. So the framework you're referring to is introduction, discovery, like agenda,
before the discovery,
agenda, discovery, and then whatever the other steps are. Right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And then moving towards that close component, right?
Correct. So you want all of that there. Yeah. You need to get to all those points, but you can't just go, boom, 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 boom. Yeah. You've been sold to, I'm assuming, by people from like offshore call centers where they're just reading this thing, and you try to interject and they don't care. They just barrel past you. Yeah. Man, it just stinks of sales.
Hate those people.
And nobody likes it. And they don't,
hate those people.
It doesn't work. Yeah. I guess you're trying to move away from the old school stigma of sales or telesales and sort of the negative connotations associated with it. And you do that by having a nice framework, but guys that can move around it.
Yeah, I always think if I went back to that recruitment process, right, I always consider intelligence, right? Like I think about how intelligent is the human or the salesperson to be able to have the skills to have those conversations as well, right? It's very difficult.
Because it should be just like this conversation, right? It should just be a conversation. But they switch into this mode when they're making sales where all that sort of that matey
that
stuff
natural
just disappears and it becomes awkward and stilted and weird. If you just have a conversation and treat them like a normal human being, you'll get so much further. So again, I think that just speaks to, like you said, the hiring process. Hire a person over a salesperson. There's a lot to be said. And not that they're not the same person. But put personality at the forefront, I think.
Oh, dude, communication, right? Effective communication.
Communication's the big one.
Important.
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely.
Okay, so we're building a team. We've got some sort of framework in place. We've got our leads coming in. It's about 14 days from start to finish to close a deal.
Yep.
We've got our KPIs in place, which are maybe call volumes and talk times and all that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So how do you maintain the team now? Like, what are some of the key things that you would execute against to keep the team up, keep them motivated, keep them pumping? Like, what does that look like?
So I guess the big thing is ongoing coaching. That's number one. And I think it's got to address a couple of things, right? So there's always going to be upskilling that can be done. So you need to tick that box.
Yeah.
But then, like you said, there's a lot of it when it comes to a salesperson is psychological, right? Because you can have really hard days. There's got to be a lot of resilience. There's got to be confidence. So I think maintaining their sort of psychological health and looking after that side of things is important too. So I think there has to be fun and energy and things like that.
Let me pull you up on that one, right?
No,
so
please do.
I've got a little bit of a bug on this one. Is that, why is the business responsible to manage an individual's psychology or motivation, right?
Yeah, look,
when they're being paid, they can earn big six-figure salaries. Do you just have to suck it and see, right? Or you just have to do that? Like,
look, I think
you don't have a choice.
Look, I guess you could choose not to, but then you might have a guy that just spirals and you lose a good salesperson. And I think sales is something that probably does hit the psyche pretty hard. You're living in a world of rejection sometimes. I think of any profession out there, it's one where their psychological well-being has such an impact on your bottom line, right? So if you can manage it and keep them up and motivated and energetic and feeling good, I think you're only going to get more out of them.
Yeah. No, look, I do agree with that. I think it's challenging, but I absolutely do agree with that. Learning and development strategies. How do you keep them motivated and up? I think competitions are great, by the way.
They create energy, they create drive, and sales guys like money. So, like you said, having the right KPIs, but having the correct commission structure attached to that, crazy important for keeping sales guys motivated, because that's what they're all after is money. That's why they're in the game.
There is. I also like to break them away, right? I say, look, every 3 months, mate, take a full 5-day weekend. Just
reset,
decompress. Get grounded, relax, come back and hit another quarter, right?
Yeah, because it's because the clock always restarts. It doesn't matter how good your month is or your quarter is. You're back to zero again, and that is a tough sort of pill to swallow sometimes. I think you got to look after your team, but get experts in, pay for outsourced training. Just invest in learning and development.
I think you have to have a budget for it, right? You have to have money allocated to it.
And that's not easy when it's a small company, especially if you're in a startup phase. Where do you find it? Everything is going back into the business and trying to generate, it's probably being spent on marketing. It's
difficult. I think learning and developers is the last thing people spend money on.
Oh, it absolutely is.
You only do it when you're making money, but not when you don't have any.
And if you were to invest in it earlier, you're probably going to make more money. It's kind of a rock and a hard place, chicken and egg kind of thing.
Yeah.
But a lot of businesses I speak to, they say the exact same thing. They're like, we need to invest in it, and it's always a priority until something else is a bigger priority. Yeah. And then it just drops down the list. It's a tough one.
It is a tough one, but critical one at that, right? So,
absolutely.
All right, so team's built, they're ticking along, they're generating revenue, you've got a training, learning and development strategy in place, you're focused on motivation, keeping them fresh, refreshing them, every 3 months or whatever.
Yep.
And now it's about how do you build on that and scale that team, right? So I suppose we've got to talk a little bit about marketing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because the sales agent needs someone to call.
They do.
Before we do that, I want to talk about cold outreach, because I'm a fan of it. I think it works. People hate it.
Yeah, they hate doing it.
They hate doing it, but I think there's value in it. So before we jump on to lead generation and keeping the team calling with good quality leads, how do you feel about cold outreach? Do you think it's got some street cred?
Yeah, look, I do. It's tough, and I think there's a lot of people that are probably losing, interest in cold outreach or the value in cold outreach.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
a place I worked, so I was their head of BD for Australia and New Zealand. We were purely cold outreach. Look, we maybe had
commercial though, right? Was that commercial?
B2B.
Yeah.
But 5%, we basically had no digital marketing strategy, no ads running, no inbound.
Yeah.
Purely cold outreach. And, that's a business that's been around for 30 years, purely existing of cold outreach.
Wow, man. That's so cool.
But that cold outreach was really refined cold outreach. So super targeted, personalized, well-researched, low-ish volume, but really high converting because it was super, super targeted, which I think if you're going to do cold outreach, there's a lot to be said for that approach as opposed to this crazy scattergun thing where you're just sort of hitting and hoping.
Yeah, I was so that B2B stuff's really different to consumer, right? So
that's very true.
In consumer, my cold outreach strategy is let's just call everybody we can
as hard as we can, as many as we can.
Yeah.
And I guess it depends. If you've got a product where your market is everybody, then why not?
Yeah.
In this sort of scenario that I was talking about there in that example, our market was really small. It was a very unique product that was sold to a very specific market.
Yeah.
So you have to be incredibly...
Was that CEO and C-suite market?
It was purely CEOs and managing directors, basically.
Yeah.
It's a very defined market. Yeah. And you're also dealing with a market that's quite intelligent and you can't just go in guns blazing. That doesn't work.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so... I think cold outreach has street cred. For me, it does, because I think, look, you're not going to get high conversion. I get that. We've never had high conversion, but I think it makes the sales agent stronger.
Oh, 100%.
It makes them work hard. And I think it's a good strategy to test people, and then you can move them into the team, right?
Yeah, well, look, the other benefit is you're not spending money on leads that are getting burnt, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, it's going to build resilience and strength and all of these things. And then when you move from cold outreach to working a warm lead, how much easier is the sales guy going to find it?
Yeah, 100%.
It makes them super thankful and appreciative of the lead.
Yeah.
There's absolutely a place for it. I think it needs to be done in combination with a whole bunch of other strategies.
Yeah.
But I'd never remove it completely.
Okay, cool. So so you heard that cold outreach still works. Okay, so marketing, right? You need to bring ClickFunnels and bring leads into a team. And depending on the size of the team, it needs to be at high quantity, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So talk to me about your experience around generating leads and how you push them into the team, the quality of the leads and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, cool. So there's a lot to be said for a quality over quantity approach for a couple of reasons, right? It goes back to what we were saying before about trying to make 200 calls a day and all these things. It's hard work for very low reward, and I think it burns people out. And I think the same can be said if you're calling shitty leads all day, right? Even if they're coming in at high volume, you'd be better off concentrating your focus on a high converting lead that are nurtured down the sales cycle, not just some guy that's
just clicked on a button.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I guess we're getting into a conversation now about lead nurturing and ClickFunnels and the importance of that. But
let's not go down that rabbit hole because it's big, right?
There's a lot to speak there, and that's I guess a marketing conversation rather than a sales
conversation. Let's focus the conversation on. So the health of the agent is sometimes pursuant to the quality of the lead, right?
Because as you'd be aware, the one thing that every sales agent is going to blame is the quality of the leads. Not having enough leads, the leads are shit.
Don't get me started. The leads are shit. The sky's falling in.
And there's, sometimes that is the case where you do have a lead issue.
I get that. Yeah.
Which again, the importance of other strategies like cold outreach. But I think leads are super important, but you should have a focus on quality over quantity. So, you've got to have an avatar, you've got to understand your customer, and you've got to have product market fit, and then you've got to figure out, well, how do you push that out to the market?
Hey, I just want to wind back a little bit. So the cold outreach thing, right? Here is a problem I'm trying to find a solution to.
Yeah.
So, we've got, say, 100,000 old inquiries sitting in a CRM somewhere, right?
Well, guys that have come in, you haven't closed, and they're just sitting there.
They've been sitting there for 2 years, 3 years.
Yep.
Maybe 3 months, 6 months. I want to cold outreach that database, but I'm trying to think, what sort of person would you recruit to do that, right? Because it's tough. That's got to be the toughest thing to do.
Yeah, there's not a lot of love with that job. It's going to be just relentless calling. I guess it depends on, again, who your market is, because there's something to be said for offshoring a job like that.
Yeah. Tried that, failed twice, 3 times.
Because of your market?
Maybe, yeah. I'm not 100% sure. I've got to be honest with you. I think, did we engage the wrong agency overseas? Is it our market, our cohort, our customer? I just really don't know.
But I think if you're talking about, that cold outreach to that big pool of sort of old dead leads, I think there's probably something to be said for adopting a model that is like an appointment setter or a BDR model where
set. That's it.
That's it. So you don't want a sales guy who's a closer to work those leads because that's an absolute waste of his time and energy. Yeah. But you can get someone in for a way lower salary with less experience, or you can, it's very easy to train up an appointment setter. Get them to at that point, it is just high volume. If they're making 200 calls a day and just smashing through
200 calls, wow,
and booking appointments for your closers, then that's probably the strategy I'd adopt in that situation.
Mind you, I say that where I go, oh wow, 200 calls, that's so much, but that's a lot, right?
It is 200's. But no one's picking up the phone. 200's pretty manageable.
Yeah, I started in recruitment, right, in sales. I was making 200 calls a day, every day. You know what I mean?
That doesn't happen anymore.
You're getting a lot of people to tell you to piss off. I can tell you that right now. And that was cold outreach, by the way. Okay, so you got to have the marketing strategy. Leave that to an agency or leave that to a specialist, right? Like, I don't think the salespeople should be involved in the marketing.
No, but they need to talk to marketing and vice versa because one informs the other. But no, your sales team shouldn't be developing your marketing. They should just provide advice from the coalface, right? Because they're dealing with the customer each day.
Yep. Okay, so that's all humming. Leads coming in. The team have got their metrics. You're pushing them towards a KPI. You're having regular meetings and you're holding them accountable, right?
Yep, cool.
So how do you scale that though, right? Like I always struggle with the ability to scale a sales team. And for me, one of the biggest challenges that I face is recruitment to be able to scale that team. So there's probably all these different verticals that you can run. Give us a couple of ideas on how to scale a team fast if you need to, right?
Look, it's tough. Particularly at the moment, you've seen what the market's like. It's like 3.8% or something unemployment. It's difficult to hire. Yeah. I think one of the most important things would be, and I think I've heard you say this before, hire quickly but fire more quickly. If you've got the wrong guy and you're trying to scale and you brought him in on a decent base salary, for example, and they're not hitting their number, you can't spend 3-6 months with them. You need to get them out and you need to get someone else in.
Yeah, it's funny, right? You can hire a senior salesperson at a high salary or a cadet or a trainee in at a really low salary, so there's these two tolerances working at the same time. How long do you give sort of each of those is really difficult to figure out.
And you've got a whole lot less risk with that young guy on a low salary because it's not it's not blowing your capex. So you can spend a little more time to ramp them up. A senior guy needs to be firing really quickly, otherwise it's just costing you money. Yeah. And it's not just the salary, it's the amount of time that say your sales manager or your sales coach or whoever is having to invest in their onboarding and their ramping and it's the leads that are going to them that they're not converting, that if they went to another one of your experienced agents, they're going to generate revenue. So there's a lot to be said there. Yeah. I guess nowadays you got to think about, do you hire someone that needs to be in office? Do you open it up and hire people remotely? You've got to open up the floodgates a little bit. Yeah. Do you go through a recruitment agency? Do you run it in-house? Have you got a HR department that can manage it? If not, how much time can you invest in recruitment, given how many other things you've got on your plate?
I find recruiters, it's challenging, right? Because they're really expensive.
And you're from that space. I guess you know it pretty intimately, yeah.
And if the market's poor in a certain region, right, what are the agencies doing that are going to be better than what you can do, right?
Yeah,
they're really just filtering through the same people. And then you're having to pay 10% of the annual salary on that, right?
I guess they're good for a high-level sale. If you're hiring senior executives and, where there's 100%. A really in-depth recruitment and interview process. Yeah. But if you're looking to hire sales guys, I think ad on Seek, LinkedIn, whatever, run the gauntlet.
So talk to me about a pivot in that strategy, right? So you've just got you guys calling, you got your outreach team. I love the idea of having an outreach team, appointment setting for a sales team.
Yep.
And then there's the concept of, do you have SDRs and a closing team, right? So talk to me about what that looks like.
Well, that's like the big thing now, right? Particularly in software as a service sale. Yeah. Look, that's the model that I ran, kind of a primitive version of that back when I was working in, with that C-suite or targeting that C-suite level.
So that SDR model?
We didn't call it SDR, and it was probably a little. They weren't running a full discovery, but we had a team of researchers exclusively that all they did was research leads. They'd pass them on to the appointment setting team, who would run through the whole gatekeeping process and secure the appointment and do a small discovery.
Was that first team offshore?
No, we had it all.
Okay, it was all
in-house.
Yeah, okay, great.
All in the one office.
So you're in control of it.
That's it. Yeah. And everyone, each researcher answered to an appointment setter, and each appointment setter was tied to a BD or state director who did the face-to-face sale. So, all vertically integrated, and they all communicated together. So one would inform the other when something was off, and you could tweak it. So that model works. It's an expensive model to run.
Well, it's the FTE costs, right?
Yeah, it's all FTE with, commissions and bonuses attached as well. And we were doing, like I said, low volume, but really highly targeted, but it's a model that carries a lot of risk as well. Yeah. So, but I think there's a lot to be said for the modern SDR or BDR and AE model because
AE account executive or
AE account executive and sales development or business development,
account management, that type of stuff. Yeah,
that's it. It's hard to expect, particularly if you're looking at high performers, for them to have the time to do everything, right? Like, say you're getting how many leads do you guys get in per week?
Hundreds.
So you've got a guy that's an unreal closer. Do you really want him to spend his time and energy just calling guys that aren't even picking up the phone?
It's very unproductive, right? I want my closers closing. A pre-qualified guy who's walked through a filtration process, right?
Your best closer, how much time would you say he's actually getting to spend on closing? It would be the least, the smallest proportion of his 10%. Time, right? And the most would be spent calling guys that don't pick up the phone.
Yep.
So
it's pretty stupid, right?
When you put it like that, it's just like, well, shit, why would we ever adopt that model?
Yeah. But here's the thing. Just about every sales team will do that.
100%. It's a model that's existed forever.
Yeah. And I know in SaaS they adopt, especially, and I know in America with HubSpot when they launched all these companies, Salesforce and all that stuff, that they moved to the AE SDR model, which is a filtration system.
That's it.
And just qualifying people, giving them to your closers, close the deal, basically 1 or 2 calls. Generates the revenue, signs the subscription, and on and on it goes, right? Great model.
There's risk with it as well. Like there needs to be really clean handover and communication between your AEs and SDRs. And, I think there's probably buyers that don't like that model, particularly when that handover is sloppy, because it's like they're repeating themselves and going through the motion with a second person.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
But when executed properly, it's I think it's the model that everyone should adopt. It's the model that I run now.
Yep.
Cool. I'm a big fan.
I want to talk about the Pareto principle, right? 80-20 principle. Love that principle. I adopt that principle. I execute against it. I think there's a lot of validity to it, right? So we've got a consumer sales team. So you built the team. They're firing. They're generating revenue. Yeah. But what I find behind the consumer sales team is this opportunity, right? Where the person that you're speaking to, who you're selling one product to, is connected to all these other people, which is really your commercial and your B2B type stuff. So I struggle with how do you get the consumer sales team, or what mechanisms do you set up? Obviously, you got to sort of remunerate them to be motivated to pass that on to somebody else. Of course. But how do you do that, and what does that look like?
I think before any of that, it's getting or training them up so they've got the ability to identify those opportunities first and foremost. Because I think that's probably where most teams fall down, right? They're not listening for it, so they don't.
Awareness is what you're saying.
Yeah, awareness. That's the best term, because they're so focused on closing that one sale that's in front of them that it's blinkers on, right? And they just don't even think about what opportunity might sit in his first, second, or third degree connections.
It's crazy.
So awareness would be number one. But once you got them thinking like that, I think, like you said, there needs to be remuneration tied to it. And what does that look like? And how do you make it worth their while? Because at the end of the day, I think what you're getting at is they hand this over to a different team, right? That's commercially focused or whatever, and they just get paid for that referral alone. So it's money for jam, right?
It is, but it's where the revenue, that's where it sits, right? Like there's so much more revenue there than I think the consumer vertical in some instances, right? And we just walk straight past it.
Well, I think the consumer space is tough. The consumer space is 100%. I think it's harder to sort of infiltrate the commercial space.
Yeah.
Easier to get running with consumer.
Yeah.
But I think consumer's ceiling sits so far below commercial.
Yeah.
And obviously commercial, it's a far longer sale. It's a harder sale. There's more people involved. There's more moving parts. But one sale's worth, 1,000 consumer sales.
Like, dude, I felt like I've done it the wrong way around. Started in consumer, moving into commercial. It should have been commercial first, I thought. But I think if you do it that way, you actually don't go into consumer, because why would you?
Well, you never would. And I think, like you say, consumers, it's easy to get it up and running. It's easy. Your market is just everybody out there. They're easy to get at. And I think it's a good sort of proving ground. You can build your systems, you can build your processes, your policies, you can do all of that on a consumer level far easier than commercial. Plus, the advertising, the marketing, all of those things are way harder for a commercial division. I think there's a lot more that needs to go into it. It's a tougher get, but the reward is way bigger.
100%, I agree with that. So what I want to talk about is wrap some numbers around it for people, right? Because there's lots of people out there talking about sales, but they don't give any numbers.
Yep.
And sometimes when I watch that material, I always go, well, hey, you've told me 10% of something that I need to know, because if you can tell me what the KPI or the number is, that would help me a great deal, right? Especially for a young person trying to build a sales team. So
of course.
No one talks about commissions, right? And no one really talks about the methodology and the numbers around commissions, like percentages. What do you pay an agent who'll close a deal that's worth $1,000, right? Is it 3%, 5%, 10%? And how do you tear that out? Give me a little bit of context around that and what that looks like.
From a commercial or a consumer division?
From a consumer perspective, yeah.
Well, I guess a lot of it comes down to what's the model you're running. Because if you run commission-only guys, it's going to be way different to running FTEs.
Okay, well, let's start with commercial-only guys. What
commission-only guys?
Yep.
Pay them heaps. I don't know.
20, I agree, right?
30%.
I agree. I say pay them as much as you can.
Because you've got, the good thing about the commission-only guy, you've got zero risk. If they don't earn, you're not out of pocket at all. But they need to be remunerated well. I think they're going to tend to be guys that are high achievers. They want to earn big money. I don't know, 20, 30% is what I would say you got to pay them.
Awesome. 20, 30%. Okay, great. So pivot. FTE, so full-time employees, working in a sales team, what sort of commission ratios would you look at there?
Again, it's dependent on base. I know there's companies out there that pay really low base. I think your Telstra's and or whatever, their Vita Group or whatever, really low bases.
Yeah.
I don't know what their commission looks like.
Yeah.
But I would advise, if you're looking for a more seniorish guy, a reasonable base, you might pay him 70,000, something like that.
Yeah.
And then I'd probably give them, I don't know, a sliding scale, somewhere between 5 and 10% commission on top of that. But
5 and 10.
No caps. Never cap commission either, because that's the biggest demotivator ever.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of companies who put a glass ceiling, right? So it's just...
It's such a crazy thing to do, because once they hit that, why have they got any incentive to work?
Well, they'll go and work somewhere else.
Yeah, right? it's incredibly dumb.
All right, so for contractors, 20 to 30. For FTEs, 5 to 10, right?
I think that's about right. Uncapped.
Yep. I have a strategy that, I think you have say a 55 trainee, a 65, 2 to 3 years worth of experience, and a 75, say 5+ years of experience.
I think that's probably right.
And then the KPI achievement for them is closer, so it's shorter. They have to get there faster, and their KPI is higher, right?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that.
Yeah. That's a good strategy that I think works. Look, there's peaks and troughs in that, but sort of generically that sort of works across the board, I think.
And then you've got that whole conversation around how often do you pay commission, over what period of time do you measure against it? Do you need consistency built into it? That's a whole different thing as well.
Well, look, we just pay weekly, because if you can't manage your money well, you sort of need a weekly, right?
Yeah, but there's a big argument against paying weekly as well.
I get it. I get it. So and that means that. So what is the argument on that, actually?
So say I'm a guy that's making 30% commission.
Yeah.
And I have a massive week. I bring in $40,000 worth of sales. What am I making on that? 10 grand?
Yep.
Next week I just can kick my feet
So you're saying you're going to get demotivated, put your feet up, and have an easy week?
Not everybody will, but there's guys that will, because $10,000, that's a month's it's a month's salary. That's a good month's salary.
Yeah.
I've made that in a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might just kick back now.
Yeah. Hey, I want to thank you for your time, buddy. I really appreciate it. I know you've got a meeting to go to in about 8 minutes. So
I do have a meeting in about
So we can cut it there. But really great to talk about sales, right? I think we should probably do a part 2 to this, because I think we should talk about marketing.
Yeah, I think we're probably halfway through the journey.
I think so. So that was all about building a team, some of the sort of rough KPIs and activity you can run around that. But marketing is such a critical part to get that right. So maybe we do a part 2 on that. Hey, thanks for joining us. Really do appreciate it.
No, my pleasure.
You've got to get to a meeting. You've got 6 minutes to get there.
I'll get there.
And look forward to speaking next time.
No, sounds good, mate. Cheers. Mate.
So, hey, thanks for joining. I hope you got something out of that. Like, there's so much in the whole sales process, right, to get right. I personally think it's one of the most critical components of running a business, starting up a business and getting it right, because it generates all the revenue for the company, right? And without that, the business can't go in there. So what we're talking about is more of a commercial type operation where you have a sales team. Couple of things to note, it's about building framework around recruitment, getting that right. It's also about having the right KPIs and being able to identify that and putting those things in place, and then figuring out how you execute against it. Nurturing, coaching the team, and activities, looking at what they're doing, finding the right people and moving them out quickly. I think you said hire fast and fire fast, right? So moving people in and out when you find the right person, retain, and then that's sort of how you scale. Get your commissions right, pay well, right? And pay frequently, I believe, and no glass ceilings. Don't restrict your salespeople from earning the amount of money that they probably want to earn. And then I think we should do a part 2 is about marketing, right? How do you bring the marketing into that fold, and what does that look like? So I hope you got something out of it. Really do appreciate it. And thanks for watching. And we look forward to speaking to you next time. Cheers.